The conference room was freezing. There were no windows, just 4 gray walls and a long glass table that reflected the harsh overhead lights. I sat on one side of the table. Across from me sat Regina Croft, the head of human resources, and Marcus Thorne, our new vice president of operations. Marcus was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He was playing with an expensive gold pen, spinning it between his fingers with a smug smile. Regina didn't smile. She opened a thick blue folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the glass toward me. "Sign it, Joshua," she said. Her voice was as cold as the room. "It is a standard termination agreement. We are letting you go, effective immediately. My name is Joshua Vance. For the last 6 years, I have worked as the Senior Director of Infrastructure Architecture and Security Compliance at Titan Manufacturing. I built the entire cloud network from scratch. I knew every line of code, every server, and every security gateway, keeping this multi-million-dollar company alive." I looked down at the paper. It cited severe performance issues and offered exactly $0 in severance. It was a complete lie. I looked up at Marcus. "Performance issues? 2 weeks ago, you used my structural blueprints to secure board approval for the upcoming $120 million acquisition. You put your own name on my reports, Marcus. You didn't even change the font." Marcus laughed, leaning back in his leather chair. "Business moves fast, Joshua. We are restructuring. We are bringing in a highly efficient, outsourced offshore team to handle network maintenance. Your role is redundant. We need you to hand over your master encryption keys and exit the building. An offshore team cannot run this infrastructure," I said calmly. My heart wasn't racing. I didn't get angry. I have always been a man of data and logic, not emotion. The entire enterprise network requires my specific compliance oversight to function. If I leave without a proper transition, the system will flag a major security anomaly. Regina leaned forward. She slammed her palm onto the glass table. "Know your place, Joshua," she sneered. "You are just an employee. You don't own this company, and you don't make the rules. You're done here. Sign the paper, pack your desk, and let security escort you out. If you fight this, we will make sure you never work in financial tech again." I looked at Regina. Then I looked at Marcus. They genuinely believed they had all the power. They thought they were crushing a helpless technician who would crawl away quietly. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Fine," I said. I picked up the pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the page without a single tremble in my hand. I stood up, walked back to my office under the watchful eye of a security guard, and placed my few personal items into a small cardboard box. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closed, leaving me completely alone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my personal smartphone. I didn't open a company app. I opened a private, encrypted master gateway app that I had built myself. Apex Financial Technologies didn't actually own the proprietary automated security protocols protecting their servers. Years ago, the board refused to buy the permanent enterprise license because it was too expensive. So, I used my own private vendor license to keep them online. On my phone screen, I tapped a red icon. I completely unlinked my independent license from the Titan corporate server. Immediately, a small digital clock appeared on my screen, counting down in bright red numbers. 26:00, 25:59. In exactly 26 minutes, the global system would realize the security validation was missing. It would flag a catastrophic compliance breach. It would automatically shut down every portal and lock out every single user in the company. They wanted me to know my place. In 26 minutes, they were going to find out exactly what my place was. The humidity of the underground parking garage hit me as I walked out of the elevator. My footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. I walked over to my car, opened the trunk, and carefully placed the box of my belongings inside. I climbed into the driver's seat, closed the door, and just sat there in the silence. I started the engine, and the digital clock on my dashboard lit up. 25:02. I felt a wave of absolute calm wash over me. Underneath that calm was a quiet, cold fury. For 6 years, I gave everything to Titan Manufacturing. I worked 80-hour weeks. I missed family dinners, holidays, and weekends. I did it to build an unbreachable data infrastructure that handled billions of dollars in financial transactions. Meanwhile, executives like Marcus Thorne took long golf trips, attended luxury retreats, and collected massive bonuses based entirely on the work I did. Now, the truth of their betrayal was completely clear to me. The restructuring lie. Marcus didn't want to cut costs. He wanted to eliminate the only person who knew he was a fraud. The HR cover-up. Regina Croft wasn't protecting the company. She was protecting Marcus. They were political allies, climbing the corporate ladder together, aiming for massive executive promotions once the $120 million acquisition was finalized. But their complete lack of technical knowledge had blinded them to the operational reality of the business. They thought software was just something you bought once and ran forever. They didn't understand that a network is a living thing. More importantly, they forgot about our largest client, Vanguard Holdings. Vanguard Holdings accounts for 65% of Titan's total annual revenue. They are a massive global conglomerate, and they do not tolerate risks. Because we handle their sensitive financial pipelines, they have a strict, hard-coded clause in their enterprise contract. The Vanguard Compliance Clause. Any lapse in active, verified security compliance validation will instantly trigger an automatic service suspension. Furthermore, Titan will face an immediate $10 million breach penalty for failing to maintain standard uptime protocols. Marcus and Regina thought they were just firing an expandable manager. They had no idea they had just cut the single thread holding a multi-million-dollar empire together. I looked down at my phone. The red numbers were dropping fast. 1542. 1541. I watched the countdown tick away. I could picture exactly what was happening on the floors above me. People were typing away, sending emails, processing transactions, completely unaware that the digital floor was about to vanish right from beneath their feet. Exactly 10 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate violently in my hand. It wasn't a phone call. It was a rapid-fire sequence of internal, automated system alerts from the Titan Network core. Alert: license authentication failure. Alert: validation token missing. Alert: beginning data isolation protocol. The system was starting to bleed out. The automated security routines were sensing that the master validation link was dead. To protect the financial data, the servers were preparing to go into absolute lockdown. I threw the car into reverse and backed out of my parking space. The show was about to start. I shifted my car into drive and navigated the exit ramp of the parking garage. I didn't speed away, and I didn't head home to sit in a dark room and feel sorry for myself. Instead, I drove directly across the street to a small, quiet coffee shop with a row of large glass windows. Those windows gave me a perfect, unobstructed view of the front entrance and the upper executive floors of the Titan manufacturing building. I ordered a large black coffee, found a corner booth near the back, and opened my laptop. I connected to the coffee shop's public Wi-Fi network, fired up a secure virtual private network, and brought up my monitoring dashboard. To understand why I was so calm, you have to understand how a massive financial network actually functions. Think of a corporate network like a high-tech fortress. Most people think the walls are what keep it safe, but it's actually the automated security checks at the gates. 3 years ago, Titan underwent a massive platform overhaul to prepare for the future acquisition. During that process, we needed a permanent master enterprise security validation license to keep the data pipelines running safely. The vendor wanted $45,000 for it. Our corporate board, in their infinite wisdom, refused to approve the budget line item. They called it an unnecessary expense and told me to find a workaround. To keep the platform from crashing before launch, I implemented a temporary fix. I used my own grandfathered, independent consultant license to bridge the gap. I didn't hide this from anyone. In fact, I sent a detailed, high-priority email thread to the entire executive team, which was buried deep in the corporate archive. In that thread, I explicitly stated that this master security license remained the sole intellectual property of my private engineering firm. I noted that it was tied directly to my active personal authentication token, and that it could be revoked at any time if my independent status changed. Marcus Thorne and Regina Croft never bothered to read that technical documentation. They didn't read the historical archives, either. They were political climbers, not builders. To them, technology was just a magic black box. As long as the lights on the servers were green, they assumed everything running inside the building belonged to Titan Manufacturing. Now, my dashboard screen showed the countdown hitting 0. Midnight. The digital avalanche began instantly. Without my active digital signature validating the network every 60 seconds, the entire financial pipeline panicked. The automated security protocols did exactly what I designed them to do. They assumed the system was under a massive, sophisticated cyber attack. To protect our clients, the core servers went into an absolute hard-coded isolation mode. They sandboxed all active client data, severed the external communication links, and locked the doors. Through the coffee shop window, I took a slow sip of my coffee. The change was immediate. I could see the upper floors of the building lighting up. Employees began gathering near the massive glass walls, pointing frantically at their monitors. The trading desk floor was a sea of sudden, panicked movement. People were jumping up from their chairs, waving their hands, and rushing toward the management offices. Inside the network, every single user had just been hit with an unbypassable blood-red lockout screen. The automated security system had effectively built a fortress around the data, and it had thrown away the key. And the only copy of that key was sitting right next to my coffee cup on a cheap wooden table across the street. The trap hadn't just been set, it had officially sprung, and the people inside had absolutely no idea that they were the ones caught in it. While the executives inside the Titan building were realizing their entire world had stopped spinning, I went to work on my laptop. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I didn't delete a single file, and I didn't corrupt a single database. Doing that would be illegal, and I am a man who strictly follows rules and data. Instead, I spent the next 20 minutes systematically securing my final digital audit trail to protect myself from whatever desperate lies Marcus and Regina would try to invent next. I opened my secure cloud backup and began downloading years of carefully saved files. I pulled up email threads where Marcus had explicitly ordered me to remove my name from major technical deliverables so he could present them to the board as his own work. I saved recorded virtual meetings where Marcus stumbled over basic operational terms while I quietly explained the entire infrastructure to our investors while he took the credit. I downloaded the server access logs, proving that Marcus had spent his first 3 months in the office deleting my name from the system architecture registries to make me look like a redundant asset. Then, I pulled up the crown jewel of my archive. It was the original licensing agreement signed by the company's founding CEO 4 years ago, long before Marcus or Regina had ever been hired. It was an ironclad, legally binding document. Because the company had refused to buy out my private security license for $45,000, the founding CEO had agreed to a very specific fallback clause. The clause was simple. If my employment with Titan Manufacturing was ever terminated without cause, or if I was removed from my role without a mutually agreed transition plan, the corporate license would instantly expire. If Titan attempted to keep using the security architecture anyway, the use of my personal intellectual property would automatically convert into a private commercial lease. The cost of that emergency lease? A non-negotiable $2.5 million per month, billed directly to the corporate treasury with a mandatory minimum of 12 months. I compiled all of these documents, logs, and agreements into a single, encrypted file package. I attached the termination agreement Regina had forced me to sign, which clearly stated I was being fired immediately with 0 severance and no transition period. I sent the entire package directly to Sarah, my employment attorney, who had been on standby since Marcus first tried to plagiarize my blueprints. The package is sealed, Sarah. I typed in a brief message. They officially triggered the clause. File the notice of intellectual property lease immediately. I closed my email and looked back out the window. The corporate parking lot had devolved into pure, unadulterated chaos. Mid-level managers were sprinting out of the main glass doors, clutching their corporate phones to their ears, their faces pale with shock. The building's security guards were standing at the entrance, looking completely overwhelmed as delivery drivers, clients, and confused staff members crowded around the revolving doors. The entire multi-million-dollar corporate entity was completely paralyzed. Because they had insisted on making my termination immediate, they had legally and physically severed their own access to the network. They had no transition plan, no backup system, and absolutely no technical understanding of how to fix it. My legal ironclad barrier ensured that they couldn't blame me for a single dime of the damages. They had read the rules, they had written the termination, and they had walked directly into the buzzsaw entirely on their own. They wanted me to leave immediately, and now they were about to discover exactly how expensive my absence was going to be. The coffee shop was quiet, the gentle hum of the espresso machine providing a sharp contrast to the digital war zone across the street. My phone began buzzing continuously against the wooden table. It wasn't a phone call yet. It was a rapid succession of frantic text messages from Leo, a brilliant 24-year-old network engineer I had mentored for the last 2 years. Leo was completely loyal to me, and right now, he was my eyes and ears inside the burning building. "Joshua, you won't believe what is happening up here." The first text read. "Marcus is down in the server room right now. He is purple in the face, sweating through his expensive shirt, and screaming at the desktop support staff. He is demanding that we perform a manual hardware override on the primary firewall to bypass the lockout screen." I leaned back in my booth and took a slow, satisfying sip of my black coffee. I had fully anticipated that exact move. Marcus Thorne was a political climber, not a systems architect, so he naturally assumed that raw authority and brute force could solve a complex software authentication issue. What his massive ego had blinded him to was a very simple, hard-coded defensive mechanism I had integrated into the core architecture years ago. If anyone attempted a manual administrative override without the active master validation token, the network wouldn't open its gates. Instead, the system would automatically interpret the bypass attempt as a hostile internal cyber attack. It would instantly trigger an automated, high-priority data corruption warning directly to the external compliance monitoring team at Vanguard Holdings. A few seconds later, Leo's next text confirmed it. He forced the override. The entire cluster just dropped offline. Vanguard's automated systems caught the flag and completely severed our external pipelines. We are totally isolated. Desperate to hide his monumental incompetence before the global executive leadership uncovered the truth, Marcus scrambled to control the damage. He couldn't let anyone know he had just broken the spine of a multi-million-dollar company. He ordered the remaining IT staff to lie to the clients, instructing them to draft a public statement claiming the outage was just a routine, temporary hardware glitch. But Vanguard's security protocols don't care about corporate public relations. They had already locked Titan out of their core payment processing network. To make matters even worse for Marcus, the timing was catastrophic. The acquisition auditors from the global conglomerate were currently on site, sitting in the executive boardroom to review Titan's books for the $120 million buyout. When their screens went completely blank, they immediately demanded an official, written explanation for the total platform blackout. Cornered and panicking, Marcus made the biggest mistake of his life. He decided to find a scapegoat to save his own skin. He drafted a company-wide emergency email and blasted it to every single employee, board member, and stakeholder. The email explicitly claimed that I, Joshua Vance, had maliciously sabotaged the company network out of spite because I had been terminated earlier that morning. I watched the email pop up on my laptop screen, forwarded to me instantly by 3 different colleagues. I read through his desperate, angry words. My professional reputation was being completely assassinated, but I didn't feel a single ounce of stress. By putting that massive lie into writing on an official corporate server, Marcus had just handed me an absolute gift. He had documented his own malice, giving me an open and shut case for corporate defamation. I saved the file, exported the server headers, and sent it straight to my attorney. The trap was completely closed. Exactly 26 minutes after I walked out of the HR office, my personal phone began to vibrate violently on the table. The screen lit up with a name that shifted the entire dynamic of the situation: Samuel Pendleton. Samuel was the billionaire founder and global chief executive officer of Titan Manufacturing. He was an old-school, hard-nosed tech pioneer who stayed completely out of daily office politics, choosing to leave the mundane operations to people like Marcus. But he wielded absolute, terrifying power over the board of directors, and his word was absolute law within the company. I knew exactly why he was calling. The alarms at Vanguard Holdings had reached his personal desk, and the acquisition auditors were likely threatening to walk out of the buyout deal. I didn't pick up. I sat calmly, watching the phone spin on the wooden surface until the call went straight to voicemail. I wanted the silence to stretch. I wanted the panic on the executive floor to simmer just a little bit longer. The phone immediately began to ring a second time. Again, I let it ring completely out. When you're dealing with arrogant corporate executives, timing is everything. You have to let them realize the full weight of their helplessness before you offer a single word. On the third consecutive attempt, I leisurely swiped the screen and placed the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. I just waited. "Joshua, thank God you picked up." Samuel's voice boomed through the speaker, completely stripping away his usual controlled, executive demeanor. He sounded frantic, breathless, and deeply shaken. "The entire system is completely dead. Vanguard is threatening to pull their contract and hit us with a massive penalty, and the buyout auditors are packing their bags. I am in the server room right now, and nobody here knows what the hell is going on. I need you to get up here right now and fix this disaster." "That is an order." I kept my voice perfectly flat, polite, and completely devoid of emotion. "I'm afraid I cannot do that, Samuel. As of exactly 26 minutes ago, I am no longer an employee of Titan Manufacturing. I was called into a meeting with Regina Croft and Marcus Thorne, where I was issued a formal termination agreement due to alleged performance issues. My access has been revoked, and I was escorted from the property by security." There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could literally hear Samuel's brain short-circuiting as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. He had absolutely no idea I had been pushed out. He didn't know that his two favorite political climbers had just fired the only man who held the keys to the entire empire. "They did what?" Samuel whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rising fury. "Where are you right now, Joshua?" "I am currently sitting at the coffee shop directly across the street from the main entrance," I replied calmly, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "I have my laptop open, but since I am no longer a part of the organization, I will only discuss this matter face to face." "Do not move. I am coming down right now," Samuel ordered, slamming the phone down. I set my phone aside and looked through the large glass window of the coffee shop. Less than 2 minutes later, the revolving glass doors of the Titan headquarters burst open. Samuel Pendleton stormed out into the bright morning sun, his face red with rage. Sprinting frantically behind him, struggling to keep up, were Marcus Thorne and Regina Croft, looking completely terrified as they chased their boss across the hot asphalt directly toward my booth. The glass door of the coffee shop flew open, and the little brass bell above it chimed aggressively. Samuel Pendleton marched in first, his face a deep shade of crimson, breathing heavily. Behind him stumbled Marcus Thorne and Regina Croft. Marcus was panting, his expensive silk tie askew, while Regina's high heels clicked frantically against the tiled floor. They looked completely out of breath and utterly desperate. Samuel slammed both hands onto the edge of my wooden booth, leaning forward until he was inches away from my face. Marcus and Regina crowded right behind him like guilty schoolchildren caught in a trap. Marcus didn't even wait for Samuel to speak. He immediately opened his mouth and tried to use his usual loud, aggressive corporate bluster to regain control of the room. "Joshua, you have crossed a legal line," he barked, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. "You deliberately took down our entire enterprise infrastructure right before a multi-million-dollar acquisition review. That is federal sabotage. We have already contacted our corporate legal counsel, and if you do not hand over the master encryption keys and the validation token right this second, We will ensure that federal authorities are waiting outside this door to arrest you. You are going to prison for this." I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice, and I did not change my expression. I simply reached down, took another slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee, and set the cup back down on the saucer with a soft click. "Sit down, Samuel," I said quietly, completely ignoring Marcus's frantic outburst. Samuel glared at Marcus, gesturing for him to shut his mouth, and then slid heavily into the vinyl seat across from me. Marcus and Regina were forced to stand awkwardly in the narrow aisle, sweating under the judgmental stares of the other coffee shop patrons. I opened my laptop wider and turned the screen around so Samuel could see it clearly. "Let's look at the actual data, shall we?" I said in a calm, professional tone. "First, Marcus, I did not sabotage anything. I simply stopped authenticating a private, independent software validation license that belongs solely to my personal engineering LLC. A license that your own board refused to purchase 3 years ago to save a mere $45,000. I tapped the trackpad, bringing up the original agreement signed by the founding CEO. According to this ironclad contract, the moment Regina handed me my immediate termination papers with 0 cause and 0 transition period, your corporate right to use my intellectual property legally expired. You are currently trespassing on my proprietary architecture. I tapped the trackpad again, pulling up the company-wide email Marcus had sent out 12 minutes prior. Second, Marcus, you sent an official broadcast to the entire organization accusing me of criminal sabotage. You did this without a single shred of technical proof, purely to cover up your own operational incompetence. My attorney has already logged this server header. This is an open and shut case of severe corporate defamation and character assassination. The financial damages for this alone will be astronomical. Samuel leaned forward, his eyes scanning the documents on the screen. The color was rapidly draining from his face as he realized the sheer scale of the legal and physical trap his executives had walked into. "Now, let's look at the clock," I continued, pointing to a small countdown timer on my secondary screen. "The global conglomerate's acquisition auditors are currently sitting in your executive boardroom across the street. Their hard deadline to verify the integrity of the network platform is exactly 44 minutes from now. If the data pipelines are not restored by then, the buyout contract automatically dissolves. Furthermore, Vanguard Holdings' legal team will officially trigger the $10 million contract breach penalty for security noncompliance. You cannot sue me to fix this, Samuel. No judge in this country can issue an emergency injunction fast enough to beat that 44-minute clock. Your company will be bankrupt before my lawyer even finishes his morning coffee." Regina's hands began to visibly tremble. She stepped forward, her arrogant corporate mask completely shattered, and tried to nervously intervene. "Joshua, please," she stammered, her voice shaking. "We can fix this right now. It was all a terrible misunderstanding. I can pull back the termination papers immediately. We can wipe your record completely clean and discuss a massive salary increase. We just need you to cooperate and save the platform." I leaned back against the vinyl booth and looked her dead in the eye, letting the silence hang in the air for a long moment. "Know your place, Regina," I said softly, throwing her own cruel words right back in her face. "You told me I was just an employee who didn't make the rules. So I followed your rules. I packed my desk and I left." Samuel's jaw clenched. He slowly stood up from the booth and turned around to face Marcus and Regina. The quiet fury radiating from the billionaire CEO was terrifying to watch. "You two absolute fools," Samuel whispered, his voice shaking with pure rage. "You fired the only man holding this entire company together to feed your own pathetic egos. You lied to me, you lied to the auditors, and you completely ruined our biggest client relationship in less than half an hour." "Samuel, please, I can explain," Marcus pleaded, his face turning completely pale as a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. "Shut up," Samuel roared, slamming his hand down on the nearby condiment counter, causing several cups to rattle. "Hand over your corporate badges right now. Both of you. You are terminated effective immediately for gross negligence and willful misconduct. Security will bar you from the building. If I ever see your faces near my company again, I will personally spend every dollar I own to ensure you spend the rest of your lives in a courtroom. Get out of my sight." Marcus and Regina stood frozen in utter shock, their corporate careers completely vaporized in the middle of a public coffee shop. With trembling hands, they detached their plastic corporate badges, dropped them onto the table, and walked out the door, completely broken and utterly humiliated. Samuel took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands as he slid back into the booth across from me. The absolute silence stretched between us for a few moments. The billionaire founder looked older now, stripped of his usual corporate armor, completely aware that his entire life's work was balancing on the edge of a knife. "They're gone, Joshua," Samuel said, his voice quiet and completely exhausted. "The cancer has been cut out of the organization. Now, please, name your price. What will it take to get you back in that building and bring the infrastructure back online before the auditors walk out?" I pulled a pre-printed, neatly stapled document out of my leather briefcase and slid it across the glass table toward him. I had spent the last 20 minutes finalizing the exact terms with my attorney. "I'm not coming back as an employee, Samuel," I said firmly, keeping my voice calm and even. "I will never again place my career at the mercy of middle managers and corporate politicians. From this moment on, my relationship with Titan Manufacturing is strictly commercial. This is an independent master service provider contract between your corporate treasury and my private engineering firm." Samuel picked up the document, his eyes quickly scanning the bold headings. "The terms are non-negotiable," I explained clearly, so he could follow every line. "First, my firm will lease the proprietary master security architecture back to Titan for a fee of $1.5 million annually, guaranteed for a minimum of 5 years, paid up front every 12 months. Second, because my architecture is the foundational pillar of your core platform, this contract includes a mandatory 3% direct equity stake in Titan Manufacturing, to be fully executed immediately prior to the closing of the $120 million acquisition." Samuel gasped slightly, looking up from the paper. 3% equity? "Joshua, that is millions of dollars out of my own pocket. It is far cheaper than losing the entire $120 million buyout, losing the Vanguard Holdings contract, and paying a $10 million breach penalty," I replied coldly. "You have exactly 31 minutes remaining on that clock, Samuel. The choice is entirely yours." Samuel looked at the countdown timer on my laptop screen, then down at the contract. He knew he had been completely backed into a corner by a man who was far smarter and far better prepared than anyone else in the room. He didn't argue. He pulled out his executive tablet, opened his secure digital signature tool, and scanned the document. Within 40 seconds, the contract was legally executed, stamped, and logged into the state business registry. "It's done," Samuel said, leaning back, his chest rising and falling with relief. "Now please turn it back on." I nodded, pulled my laptop closer, and opened my master command gateway. I entered my personal authentication token and hit a single key. Enter. The bright red countdown timer instantly vanished, replaced by a row of solid green check marks. Across the street, the massive digital servers of Titan Manufacturing re-established their active validation link. The data sandboxes dissolved, the external pipelines opened up, and the security systems signaled a full green status directly to Vanguard Holdings compliance monitors. Through the glass window, I could see the frantic movement on the trading floor instantly stop as the red lockout screens disappeared, replaced by the standard operating dashboards. The acquisition was saved. I closed my laptop, placed it back in my briefcase, and stood up from the booth. I shook Samuel's hand firmly, picked up my black coffee, and walked out of the coffee shop into the fresh morning air. As I walked back to my car, I felt a deep, profound sense of vindication. Corporate environments are often filled with arrogant politicians like Marcus and ruthless manipulators like Regina, people who think they can climb to the top by stepping on the quiet, competent builders who actually do the work. They rely on titles, status, and fear. But in the modern world, Empty corporate politics will always crumble when they slam directly into raw operational reality and ironclad documentation. Marcus and Regina left the property today with absolutely nothing. Their reputations destroyed, their careers vaporized, and a massive corporate defamation lawsuit heading their way. Meanwhile, I started my engine and drove away from the curb. No longer an underappreciated director, but an independent multimillionaire corporate partner who had finally showed them exactly what my place truly was.